The monitoring station at the edge of Velhari space was the kind of posting that ended careers. Not because anything bad happened there, because nothing happened. Nothing had happened in 200 years. The console screen showed static and the slow drift of debris from a gas giant that had been silently falling apart since before the council was formed. The air recycler hummed. The food dispenser's heating element was broken. The nearest inhabited station was 4 hours away by relay signal. Pri had been here 6 months. He felt every single minute of it. He was small, even for adrenaline, gray fur, large dark eyes built for low-light environments that never got to be low-light here because the station kept its lighting uniform and cheerless. 6 fingers that moved fast and had nothing fast to move over. He was 23 years old, the youngest technician in the monitoring corps, which sounded impressive until you understood that the monitoring corps posted its youngest people in the worst stations because experience was wasted out here. He ran his diagnostics every 2 hours. He filed his reports every 4. He ate from sealed containers because the dispenser heating element had been broken since before he arrived, and no one had come to fix it. He watched the screens. The screens watched back, said nothing, did nothing. On the 94th day of his posting at Velhari Monitoring Station 7, the mass reader screamed. He had heard the audio alert exactly once before, orientation day in the training lab, when the technician running the session had demonstrated the system by pressing the test button. The sound had filled the room and Prius had flinched. The technician had smiled and said, "You will never hear that for real. This station has been operational for 200 years, and that alarm has never been triggered. You will retire without hearing it again." He heard it now. His food container spun off the panel into the low-gravity air behind him. He did not reach for it. His eyes were locked on the mass reader. The number it was showing was wrong. That number meant something the size of a planet, or a small moon, or a catastrophic sensor failure, which was the most reasonable explanation. Which was what Prex told himself while his 6 fingers flew over the calibration panel, and the calibration came back clean, and the number did not change. He ran the secondary diagnostic. Clean. He ran both again. Still clean. The number was still there, still wrong, still impossible. Then the proximity alarm joined the mass alarm. The thermal reader began climbing. 3 simultaneous alarms in a station that had not triggered one in 2 centuries. Pri pressed his palms flat against the console edge and stared at the contact trace forming on his screen. A single point moving across the grid, with a steadiness that was not accidental on a heading that resolved clearly when he calculated it out. Aimed directly at the center of Council space at Velhari Prime, at the most important system in the known galaxy. It was not decelerating. He opened the emergency channel. Velhari relay. "This is Station 7. I have a contact event." He read the mass number aloud. His voice was higher than he wanted it to be, and he did not waste time fixing it. Velocity. He read that out too. "Contact is on a direct heading for the central system. I have verified calibration and run secondary diagnostics. Readings are confirmed." The relay officer told him to verify his readings. He said he had. The relay officer told him to run a secondary diagnostic. He said he had run one. The relay officer was quiet for 4 seconds, then stand by. Pri stood by. He watched the trace move, steady, unhurried, already much closer than it had been. High Speaker Zeldith had governed for 412 years. Long enough that when the relay director walked into his private chambers with a specific quality of stillness in her face, not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of someone who had run a calculation they did not like. He set down everything he was doing and gave her his full attention before she said a word. She told him about the mass reading, the velocity, the heading. He listened without interruption. "Calibration has been verified," he said. 11 times High Speaker. The heading is confirmed. Yes. He walked to the window that looked out over the capital. The towers of Velhari Prime catching the late light, amber on stone. The gardens below 3 centuries old and immaculate. The sky above them clean and unmarked. He looked at all of it for a moment. "Which sector?" he said. She told him. He knew the sector. He had read the survey file himself 60 years ago on a slow administrative afternoon. A warm, wet world. Third from a yellow star. Unremarkable system rich in certain minerals inhabited by a species the survey team had classified as designation 7 pre-apient candidate, not primitive enough to ignore entirely, not advanced enough for first contact, a species that had not yet achieved orbital capability at the time of the survey. The resource committee had been discussing that world quietly for years in meetings where official notes were not taken. Discussions about mineral assessments, about timelines, about how long a designation 7 species typically remained in the early industrial stage before they either advanced further and became legally complicated or declined and became available prep candidate. That was the term. The survey was 60 years ago. Zelth said he said it quietly, and it was everything that needed to be said. 60 years was a long time. Species changed in 60 years. A species no one thought worth watching closely could, in 60 years, apparently build something. "Assemble the full council," he said. "Emergency session, all delegations tonight." It took 12 hours to assemble the full council. It always did, regardless of urgency. The Cathy delegation required their full ceremonial escort and refused to reduce it under any circumstances. The three-bodied Sauron could not be hurried on principle, a principle written into the council's founding charter at their insistence and held ever since. The Lenari needed formal written notice delivered by council messenger rather than relay contact, because their legal tradition did not recognize relay communication as official notification. The Heath Collective's mechanical proxies needed full signal re-encryption after every session interruption, 12 hours every time. While they traveled, the contact trace moved. By the time 23 delegations took their seats around the great circular table and the central projection unit hummed to life above it, the thing had crossed the midpoint of council space. The projection showed it now, built from accumulated sensor data, not just a point on a grid, but a shape. A vessel with a hull with weapon ports that analysts had been counting for 3 hours and reporting upward in numbers that made the counting feel like a bad habit no one could stop. The council looked at the shape. That was the silence. Not the silence of people with nothing to say, but the silence of 23 diplomatic delegations looking at a shape and searching through every word they knew and finding none of them large enough. Sauron broke it. All 3 bodies at once, the layered voices that took a moment to become meaning. "We destroy it now. The outer defense platforms have the range. The Velhari war fleet." "The combined displacement of the Velhari war fleet," Vorshin said, "is less than half the mass reading of that vessel. Then we use all of it. Every fleet combined." Ambassador Zelth's voice was quiet. The room stopped. "We do not know what that ship can do. We know its size and its heading. Firing on it with a force that may be inadequate before any communication has been attempted from a position of uncertainty. That is not a defense. That is a gamble." He looked around the table. "We are not going to shoot first." Sauron subsided. Vorshin's mandibles moved. Zelth nodded to the relay director. "Open a hailing frequency. Wideband. All known frequencies." The standard council greeting. The frequency opened. The greeting broadcast out across the distance between the ship and the council chamber. No response came. The relay technicians ran analysis on the space around the signal. They found what they privately described to each other as listening. A subtle return pattern consistent with received end process transmission. Something on the other end was hearing them. It was simply choosing not to answer yet. The hailing frequency broadcast for 11 hours. Still no answer. Vorshin stood beside Zeldeth as the trace crossed into the inner system marker. "They are ignoring us deliberately." He said they are choosing when to respond. Zelth said, "That is different." "How is it different?" "Ignoring implies they do not care. Choosing when to respond implies they care very much." He watched the trace close on the planet's position in the projection. They want to arrive first, then talk. Arrival before communication is a position statement. Vorshin's mandibles moved slowly. "They have studied us." 80 years of our transmissions, if the sector is correct, Zelth said. Of course they have. The inner defense grid had powered up automatically when the ship crossed the threshold. 47 platforms, the most powerful weapons the Council had ever built, swinging to targeting positions. Zeldith had watched the reports come in. He had watched the defense grid commander's face while the targeting analysis came back. He had watched the grid power down again. The ship had not altered its course by a single degree. It slid into orbit above Velhari Prime with the ease of something that had calculated this approach in advance from a distance, with access to precise gravitational data about the planet, below which meant they had the planet's exact mass and composition, because they had been listening for a very long time. At monitoring station Velhari 7, Pri had not moved from his chair in 12 hours. He had not eaten. The food container was somewhere in the air behind him. He had been watching the contact trace cross his screens in real time, watching the velocity hold steady, watching the heading not deviate by a single degree. No response to the hailing signals, no change in course, no acknowledgement of anything at all, just that straight, unhurried line. Around hour 11, the thermal sensors ticked upward. The gravity reader trembled. Pri pressed his face against the observation port. The ship came out of the dark slowly, which is to say it was moving at enormous speed, but it was so large that it appeared slow scale, refusing to register, until there was enough of it to compare against the stars behind it. And then he realized the stars behind it were gone, and had been gone for several seconds, and the ship was all there was in any direction. Running lights along the hull, long white lines marking edges. Without them, the ship would have been invisible, just an absence of stars, a hole in the sky. With them, it was legible, and what it said was, "I am here, and I am this large, and you should understand both things." The hull was dark grey, layered, and cross-reinforced, built not for any single journey, but for permanence. The station trembled once, very slightly from the bow wave. There was lettering on the hull, high on the prow, white on dark, large enough to read at this distance. The translation buffer in his earpiece worked at the unfamiliar script for 3 seconds. Tienas Prometheus. The ship passed him, running lights shrinking to lines, to points to nothing. Pri sat back down. He held his empty hands in his lap and thought about what he had just seen, the size of it, the straightness of the line, the complete unhurried certainty of the approach. They were not surprised. They were not exploring. They had decided to come, and they had come, and they had not stopped for anything along the way. He would look up what Prometheus meant later. He would read about fire taken from the gods and given to the people who needed it. He would read about the punishment that followed, and the refusal to stop. He would not forget the name. Part 2. The defense grid controller had 37 years of experience. 2 council military actions, 3 first contact protocols, every significant security event in the council's central system during his entire career. None of it had prepared him for what his targeting officer brought him at hour 13. The Prometheus had entered the grid's engagement range. The protocol was automatic. 47 platforms cycling to ready status, targeting arrays locked, firing solutions calculated. Every board is light green. His targeting officer, a young Velhari named Avk, set a data report on his console and stepped back. Her face was careful, the face of someone who had run the same number 4 times, hoping for a different result. He read the report. Then he read it again. The platform arrays projected output against the ship's estimated hull composition at maximum combined sustained fire over 30 seconds. Penetration of outer armor layer to approximately 4% depth, 4%. He sat with that number. Then he said, "Stand down the grid." Avi looked at him. "All platforms are passive," he said. "Log it as a precautionary de-escalation measure. Don't log the analysis." "Sir, if we fire on that ship and the math is right," he said, "we have wasted our ammunition and shown them exactly what we have. If we fire and the math is wrong..." He stopped. "Stand down the grid." She turned back to her station. The platforms went dark. On the orbital display above his console, The Prometheus moved into its final approach vector, smooth and certain, and settled into a stable orbit above Velhari Prime, as if 47 guns had never existed, as if the grid had been a formality, which it had been. The communication request came through 47 minutes after orbital insertion. Not immediately, the ship had arrived, settled, and gone quiet for nearly an hour before it reached out. Zelth had noted the timing. Deliberate. A message in the pause itself. I am here. I am not in a hurry. Take the time you need. The relay director opened the channel. A face appeared in the projection above the council table. Zelth had seen photographs of humans in the survey file. Bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, soft-bodied, variable in coloring, flat features, forward-facing eyes. Designation 7. The photographs had conveyed a general quality of fragility, a species in early development, unremarkable, not yet worth the formality of contact. The woman looking at him from the projection did not look like the photographs. It was not her appearance. Medium height, dark hair pulled close, angular face, a dark uniform with rank markings at the collar. Unremarkable technically, it was the way she was sitting. She was completely still. She looked at the projection at him specifically, which meant she knew who held the chair at the head of the table, with the expression of someone who had been preparing for this conversation for a very long time and was not worried about it. I am Admiral Kira Vasquez, she said. Her galactic standard was precise and unaccented, better than many native speakers on the council. Commanding officer of the Terran naval ship Prometheus. I represent the Terran Unified Authority. A pause. One deliberate beat. I believe this is our first official contact. It is, Zelda said, though not your first knowledge of us. A slight adjustment in her expression, not surprise, recognition. She had wondered if he would circle around it or go straight to it. No, she said. We have been aware of the Council for 82 years. We decoded your open transmission frequencies in year 11. We have been attentive since then. Attentive, Vorin said. He was trying to establish standing with his tone, the old diplomatic habit. You are listed in our survey database as a pre-apient candidate species. Your world had not achieved orbital capability at the time of our assessment. We achieved orbit 4 years and 8 months after your survey team left our system, Vasquez said. We noted that no second team returned, a pause precisely placed. We noted that your long-range sensors continued to scan the outer boundary of our system on a regular schedule. Vorson had nothing to say to that. We did not announce ourselves. Vasquez said, We had reasons for that. I'm happy to discuss them in a formal session if the Council is willing to arrange one. She looked at Zelth. We would request a meeting with the full Council within 24 hours. There are a number of matters we would like to address. Protocol for first contact situations requires a preliminary diplomatic exchange before full council sessions are. Vorson began. We are familiar with your protocols, Vasquez said, not cutting him off, clarifying. We would respectfully request an exception. We have waited a significant time for this conversation. We would prefer not to extend the wait further. Zeleth looked at her. She looked at him. The brown eyes gave away exactly as much as his did, which was nothing, which was something he noted. 24 hours, he said. We will arrange it. Thank you, High Speaker. She said it without softness, not warmth, acknowledgement. The tone of someone accustomed to speaking to powerful people without adjusting their posture. The channel closed. The room sat with it. She knew your title. The Lenary observer Tin said he had been silent until now. She addressed you first. She knew the seating arrangement. Yes. Zelth said they have studied our procedures. 82 years of council transmissions, Zelth said. Our session records are in the public archive. Our hierarchy is documented. He looked at the dark space in the projection where her face had been. They know everything about us that we have ever said out loud. Vorson said, What do they want? Zelda thought about the way she had said. We have waited a significant amount of time. He thought about what waited behind that. Not impatience, the wrong word entirely. The patience of something that had been building and planning, and had at last decided the building was sufficient. We will find out in 24 hours, he said. Prepare all delegations and get me the resource committee files. All of them. Vorsen's manner still stood. All of them? Zelda said. On the Prometheus, Commander Deo Oi watched the channel close and let out a long breath. The high speaker connected everything in real time. He said, "Survey sector, the ship, all of it, right there in the room while we were watching." "He is very old," said Captain Yeva Marchetti from across the table. She was the diplomatic corps head, tall, gay-haired, with the particular posture of someone who had been a soldier and decided diplomacy was simply a different kind of fighting. Old things are calm because they have lived long enough to know panic does not change outcomes. He knows about the resource committee. Osai said he knew before we said a word about it. Marchetti said the sector name was enough. Vasquez was at the wall display looking at the star map. Velhari Prime below them. The council system around it. The Prometheus's orbital line. She had her hands clasped behind her back. "He is going to be the one we need to work with," she said. "Not Vorsen, not Soren." She turned from the map. The high speaker. He understands what is actually happening here. Is that good or bad? It is said. "It is useful," she said. "A council leader who understands the situation clearly is more valuable than one who needs it explained. He will not waste our time." She picked up her datapad. 24 hours. Get the full presentation finalized, every section. She walked toward the door. Admiral Osai said she stopped. "What do you think they will do when they see the fleet positions?" Vasquez looked at the star map for a moment. "I think the high speaker will call a vote," she said. She walked out. Part 3. The 24 hours were the longest the council had spent doing nothing in 30 years. Soren spent 11 of them filing formal requests for a preemptive military strike against Prometheus. The first 6 went to Zeldeth and were denied. After the 6, Zelth approved a procedural instruction that allowed the clerk to decline further strike requests on arrival without forwarding them. This was technically outside his authority. He did not particularly care. Vorsin spent his hours in the survey archives pulling everything recorded about the human species, the original survey report, the long-range observation logs, and the resource committee files. The official ones, which were careful and clean, and the unofficial ones, which Zelth had ordered sealed, but which Vorsin had already read before the order came through. He sat with the unofficial files in his private terminal and read them again, and felt for the first time in a very long career the specific sensation of having made a serious mistake and not being able to identify which decision would have prevented it. Zelth spent the 24 hours thinking. He thought about Vasquez's face and what had been in it and what had not. He thought about the 47-minute gap before she made contact, deliberate. He was certain of a message in the silence itself. He thought about what he would have done arriving with a ship of that size at a civilization that had been quietly discussing his world's resources for decades, and how he would have felt, and whether feeling and action would have been the same thing or different things. He kept arriving at the same conclusion. She was not angry. She had every justification for anger. He would have been. But it was not anger he had seen in her. It was something more deliberate, something that had been carried a long way and refined into a precise and settled shape. Not a flare, a strategy. It happened at hour 16. The Council monitoring station tracking the Prometheus reported the ship's weapon systems powering up. The alert went simultaneously to every delegation. Soren immediately filed 2 more strike requests. The room Zelth was in went from quiet to very loud in approximately 4 seconds. He held up one hand. The room went quiet. "Which way are the weapons oriented?" He said. The relay officer checked, away from the planet high speaker. "The weapons are targeted at a pause, the outer system debris belt, the debris belt." The navigational hazard ring that had been charted and warned about in every approach map issued for Velhari Prime since the Council's formation, flagged in the registry for 4 centuries, a known problem nobody had ever addressed, because addressing it was not anyone's specific responsibility. They are not targeting us. Zelth said they are warming their weapons while in orbit above our primary planet, and that is categorically not targeting us. Zelda said, "Wait." They waited 11 seconds. The automated registry at the outer system marker filed an update. Navigation hazard body 7P889. A dense iron-nickel asteroid 3 kilometers in diameter, flagged as a hazard for 412 years, had been cleared from the registry. Not damaged, not deflected, not broken into smaller pieces. Cleared. No fragment trace, no debris signature, nothing. The asteroid had existed and then had not existed. And the only record of the interval was an 11-second gap between the weapons report and the registry notification. The council chamber was very still. A communication request came through from Prometheus immediately after Zelda accepted it. Vasquez was standing this time. "My apologies for the unannounced demonstration," she said. "That navigation hazard has been active in your outer system for some time. We noticed it in your approach charts during our transit preparation. Consider it a courtesy, a single beat. We look forward to the session tomorrow." The channel closed. The chamber stayed quiet. Sorin did not file any more strike requests. Zeldith contacted Vasquez privately 2 hours later. "Council First Contact Protocol," he said, "specifies that initial formal sessions are conducted via projected communication rather than direct physical meeting, the security considerations." "I understand the protocol," she said. "I wanted to confirm your awareness of the high speaker," she said. "Patient, firm. We have come a very significant distance. We are prepared to meet in person." A projection is, she found the word insufficient for a conversation of this importance. She held his gaze. "We would prefer to be in the same room. The full council convening on your vessel is not possible," he said. "The security implications of I am not proposing the full council," she said. "I am proposing a preliminary meeting, a small delegation aboard the Prometheus." She paused. "We will provide full security guarantees. Your delegates will be free to leave at any point. The meeting will last no longer than you wish." Another pause, shorter. "We would like to show you something." "What?" "The ship?" she said simply. "We would like you to see it." Zelth considered this. He thought about what it meant to accept an invitation aboard something that had just removed a 3-kilometer asteroid from existence in 11 seconds. He thought about what it said if he refused. He thought about the resource committee and the unofficial notes and the 60 years and what Vasquez already knew about all of it. 3 delegates, he said. Myself, Ambassador Vorsin, and Observer Tin. We can accommodate a larger party. 3, he said. And I want the tour before the formal session, not after. She looked at him. I want to understand what I am looking at before we sit at a table together. He said something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile. The thing before a smile that decides not to become one. Before the session, she said, Agreed. Tomorrow morning then. Tomorrow morning, he said. The channel closed. Zelda stayed at his desk for a moment. He thought about the way she had accepted his condition without hesitation, as if she had expected it, as if she had been hoping for it. He thought she wanted us to see the ship. He thought there is a specific reason for that. He went to bed. He did not sleep well. Part 4. The shuttle from Velhari Prime to the Prometheus took 19 minutes. In those 19 minutes, everyone aboard had enough time to watch the ship grow in the forward viewport and understand in a way that numbers on a relay screen never quite allowed what kind of thing they were approaching. Zelt watched it without comment. Vortin sat beside him with his mandibles perfectly still. T-Vin, the Lenari observer, who had attended more significant events in his long career than anyone else alive on the council, made notes in his log with a stylus that moved faster than usual. The shuttle pilot kept his eyes on his instruments. At 15 minutes out, the Prometheus filled the viewport completely. At 10 minutes, It was the only thing visible in any direction. The stars behind it gone, the planet below gone. Nothing existed anywhere in the viewport except the hull. Dark gray, cross-layered, built not for beauty, but for endurance. The running lights moved past overhead in long white lines, marking the edges of something so large it needed marking, or it would simply be void. The docking bay was on the port flank. To reach it, the shuttle flew parallel to the hull for 3 full minutes. 3 minutes of haul ahead and haul behind and haul above. No end visible in any direction. Zeleth did the arithmetic in his head and understood for the first time in his body, rather than his mind, what the mass reading had actually meant. The bay received them. It could have received 30 shuttles simultaneously with room to spare. It held besides their own craft 2 heavy fighters with an angular aggressive geometry. The Council's design database had no analog for 4 transport vessels and something in the far corner that a human crew rating identified when Vorsen asked as a long-range scout. The ceiling was 40 meters above the deck. The air smelled of machine oil and metal and something organic and warm. The noise level was the controlled noise of a working vessel, not loud, but constant and full. A human officer met them. Young, dark-skinned, precise in movement. Lieutenant Commander Ray, he guided them through the bay and into an interior corridor. The corridor was wide enough to drive cargo vehicles through. They passed crew members at every turn. Dozens in the first corridor alone. Then more corridors, more crew. Humans moving with the ease of people who have lived somewhere long enough to stop noticing its size. Some looked at the delegation as they passed. None stopped working. The ship did not slow for visitors. They passed a gallery section where one wall was transparent, actual glass, decorative rays said, and through it was visible the planet of Velhari Prime, blue, gray and distant, and very small. How many crew does the Prometheus carry? Zelth said. Full complement is 42,000 high speaker, Ray said. Zelth let the number settle. 42,000. The entire combined military command staff of all Council member species was smaller than the crew of this one ship. Then Stylus was moving very fast. Admiral Vasquez met them in the main observation deck. It ran the full width of the bow section. The forward wall was entirely transparent, reinforced to near invisibility, framing an unobstructed view of space. Velhari primed below the Council system around it, the stars beyond. She was standing at the viewport when they arrived, looking out. She turned when they entered. She was shorter than Zelth had expected, slightly below average height for a human, but she stood in the room the way rooms were organized around her. Captain Marchetti was to her right, positioned as interpreters always positioned themselves, slightly forward, slightly between. High speaker, ambassador, observer TV. She had all their names, of course, the correct pronunciation of each. Admiral Zelth said. They sat at a table arranged near the viewport, behind Vasquez's head, visible through the transparent wall. Velhari Prime turned in its orbit. Zelth noted the arrangement. It was not accidental. The vessel is extraordinary, Zelth said. Thank you, Vasquez said. The crew complement of 42,000 is standard for a Titan class. Yes. Zelth looked at her. There are others of this class. Yes. How many? Vasquez held his look for a moment. Then she said, 14 currently commissioned. 3 more in late construction. Voren's mandibles were absolutely still. Built where? He said, we have conducted regular long-range scans of your system for 60 years. There was no indication of large-scale construction activity. We built an orbit of our moon. Vasquez said, the moon's mass creates sufficient interference at your scan frequencies. We adjusted our construction shielding after we identified your scanning schedule. She said, we noticed your scan schedule the way you said things that were simply factual. For how long? Tin said he had set down his stylus. Large-scale construction programs began 71 years ago. Vasquez said, after we completed decoding your transmission archive and understood the full picture of our situation, 71 years. Zelth sat with that 71 years of building in secret behind a moon while appearing to council censors as exactly what they had always appeared to be, a pre-industrial species not worth watching closely. 71 years of patience and construction and silence. "You found the resource committee discussions?" he said, not a question. Vasquez looked at him. "Yes," she said, flat, complete. No visible anger in it. The tone of something known for a very long time carried long enough to stop being sharp. "And you built in response," he said. "We built because we understood our position." She said, "A species classified as a pre-patient resource candidate by the most powerful political body in the galaxy has 3 available responses. Ask for help, wait to be found, or prepare." A pause. We considered asking. "Why didn't you?" Vorson said. "We were not certain who to ask, and we were not certain what form the request should take." She looked at the table between them. "We decided that arriving with a question was less useful than arriving with a clear statement." The room was quiet. Through the viewport, Velhari Prime turned below them, slow and indifferent. Tin said, "What is the statement?" Vasquez said, "We would like to join the council." She showed them the fleet manifest. After that, a data file transferred clean and fast to the council relay. 14 Titan-class vessels. Designation, commission, date, current position. The supporting fleet 416 vessels across 7 classes. Total personnel across all elements, 3.2 million. Current positions of all Titan-class vessels were listed. Zelth read the list. He read it again. 1 ship in the current system, the Prometheus, above this planet. The other 13 were positioned at specific coordinates distributed across council space. He knew those coordinates. He had spent 40 years in council administration, and he knew exactly what occupied those positions. Every major communications relay in the network, every deep space fuel station, every long-range defense network control node, every piece of infrastructure. The council used to function as a unified body, 1 Titan at each point, not blocking, not threatening, just present. 14 months, she had said they had been in position for 14 months. For 14 months, these ships had been sitting at every critical node in the council's infrastructure, patient and invisible, while the council held its meetings and filed its reports and continued its resource committee discussions as if nothing had changed. Zeldith set the data pad down. "You came to introduce yourselves," he said. "We came," Vasquez said, "to make sure the introduction was taken seriously." Part 5. The formal council session was held in the Great Chamber as protocol required. 23 delegations, the circular table, the projection unit at the center. There was also a 24th delegation. Vasquez entered with Marchetti and Commander Osai and took seats at the table itself, not before it, not at the floor speaker position, but at the table as members. Zelth had arranged this. He had not consulted Sauron or the Karate bloc or the Lenari faction, all of whom had filed procedural objections. He had overruled all of them on grounds he had constructed specifically for this occasion and would defend in detail later. Vasquez had seen the seating the moment she walked in. Her posture adjusted very slightly, something expected turning out to be true. She sat at the table. The session began. The first hour was procedural introductions as council tradition required, and nothing could be bypassed. Delegations introduced themselves to the human delegates. Vasquez and Marchetti received each introduction with the correct form of ceremony for the introducing party. Different for the Karathi, different for Sorin, different for Hari. Each one calibrated correctly for the cultural expectations of the species introducing themselves. Every delegation noticed. None of them said anything about it because there was nothing to say. When the formalities were complete, Zelda opened the substantive session. "Admiral Vasquez," he said, "the Terran Unified Authority has requested membership in the Galactic Council. You may address the Council directly." She stood. "Members of the Council," she said, "my government appreciates the opportunity to address you in person. We understand this is unusual." She let that word sit for one full second. We are requesting full membership in the Council, not candidate status, not observer classification, not the provisional standing designated for species in the precinct period. Full membership with equal voting rights and equal standing under Council law. She looked around the table, one delegation at a time. We are also requesting the formal removal of Earth and all human inhabited worlds from any resource designation or assessment category retroactively. Sauron shifted all three bodies. You are requesting a retroactive change to survey classifications, which are established under the classifications that were applied to our world without our knowledge or consent. Vasquez said level, not heated. We are requesting their formal removal. She paused. We are also prepared to accept a permanent seat on the Resource Committee to ensure future classifications of inhabited worlds meet the standard we would all prefer to see applied going forward. The Resource Committee offer landed in the room like something heavy, set down on a table. Vorsin said, full membership under Council Charter requires a period of candidate review lasting no fewer than... We are aware of the standard requirements, Vasquez said. We are requesting an exception on the grounds that they were designed for species newly discovered and newly in contact, and we are neither. We have been aware of this Council's existence and operations for 82 years. We have been present in Council space for 14 months. The slight emphasis on present was careful and precise. We are not a new contact situation. We are a long-delayed introduction. Long-delayed introduction. Zelth watched it move through the room. Council member Rith of the Korathi, a careful diplomat who had been at this table for 70 years, said, and if the Council declines full membership and offers the standard candidate process instead. Vasquez looked at him. She picked up the data pad on the table in front of her and pressed it once. The central projection unit, the Council's own system, displayed a star map. Council territory. Every inhabited system, relay station, defense node, and fuel depot all in their correct positions and 14 points of steady light. She said nothing for a moment. She let the room read the map. The Council may choose whatever path it considers appropriate. She said, we will respect the decision. We simply want to ensure the decision is made with full information available. The map stayed up. Rathi looked at it. He was a careful man. He looked at each of the 14 points. He looked at what was adjacent to each of them. He did not say anything else. Sauron said, this is a threat. Vasquez said, this is a map. Those ships are positioned at their current operational locations. Vasquez said, they will remain there or redeploy according to our needs. They are our ships. We direct them. She looked at the Sauron delegation. We have not made any threatening action against the Council or any of its member species at any point. We removed a navigation hazard from your outer system as a courtesy. The positions of our fleet are our operational business. She set the data pad down. We are here to join the Council. That is what we want. We would like to be asked, and we would like to say yes. The chamber was held. Zelth let it hold for exactly as long as it needed to. Then he said, the Council will vote on the question of full membership for the Tan Unified Authority. Under Emergency Session Charter, a simple majority is sufficient. He looked around the table. Those in favor. The vote took 6 minutes. 14 delegations voted in favor. 6 voted against. 3 abstained. Humanity joined the Galactic Council. After the other delegations filed out and the chamber staff cleared the table and sealed the session record, Zelth remained in his chair. Vasquez remained at hers. Marchetti and Osai had gone with the documentation team. Vorchin had left with the Velhari block quietly, without looking back. The chamber emptied until it was just the two of them at the large circular table and the ventilation hum and the last of the day's light coming through the upper windows. Zelda looked at the table surface for a moment. We made a mistake, he said. Vasquez said nothing. The survey classification, he said. The resource committee discussions. The way we categorized your world without contact, without consent, without the consideration we would have extended to a species we did not find conveniently located. He paused. We made a mistake. Vasquez was quiet. Then she said, You made several. He accepted that. Yes. The windows above them had gone to early evening, amber fattening into blue. Velhari primed the sky at the end of the day. The first one, Vasquez said, was not saying hello. Zelth looked at her. 60 years ago, she said. Your survey team was in our system for 11 days. They scanned the planet. They filed the report. They left. She folded her hands on the table. My grandmother was alive when your team was in our system. She had no idea. Nobody had any idea. We had radio telescopes pointed at the sky, and your ships were there and we didn't see them because your stealth shielding was good enough. We were looking at the stars and wondering if anyone was out there. She was not angry. She was precise. If they had said hello, this would have been a very different story. Yes, Zelth said. We would have been frightened, she said. The contact would have been complicated and difficult and probably messy. You would have had every advantage, but it would have been honest. Yes, he said. The room was quiet. You handled this well, Zelda said. The fleet positioning, the arrival. The demonstration today, he looked at her. You are a very good diplomat. I'm a sailor, she said. Captain Marchetti is the diplomat. Captain Marchetti is excellent, Zelth said. You are something else. The faintest adjustment in her expression, not a smile. The thing before a smile that decides against it. What happens now? She said. The Prometheus remains in orbit for 1 standard year. Zelth said, traditional requirement for a new member's first period of formal recognition. Your fleet elements. He glanced at where the star map had been. I would appreciate notification of any significant repositioning. We can establish regular communications. She said that would be preferable to surprises. He said yes. She stood. He stood the formal leave-taking gesture of the council, which she performed correctly. Of course. High speaker. She said, Admiral, he said. She walked to the door and was gone. He stayed at the table for a moment in the empty room. He looked at the cleared chairs. He thought about the survey file and the resource committee and the unofficial meetings, and the 60 years and the 82 years, and the 14 ships, and the vote that had just happened. He thought about what could have been avoided. He thought about what had been earned. He thought about the difference between those two things, and what that difference said about his civilization, and what he intended to do about it. Starting tomorrow. The chamber lights shifted to evening mode. He walked to the window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere above him, in a stable orbit, Prometheus was going around and around. It will be there tomorrow and the day after, and for a year beyond that. He thought the galaxy has a new kind of neighbor. He thought we should have said hello first. Then he went to find the resource committee files, all of them. He had a great deal of work to do. At the monitoring station Velhari 7, Prex was packing. A new posting had come through. A relay station, secondary hub, real traffic and real work, and a food dispenser that functioned. It was a good posting. He had not expected a good posting. Then the galaxy had changed, and postings had reshuffled across the core. And here the transfer orders were signed and filed. 3 days to departure. He packed his things. There was not much. 6 months of sealed food containers, some personal items, the small library he had brought and not read enough of because it turned out 6 months of nothing happening was only boring until something happened. And then it was the most important 6 months of his life. He ran the station's final handover diagnostic. Log transfer system seal ready state confirmation for the incoming technician arriving next week. Then he looked out the observation port. The Prometheus was not visible from here. Too far, too small against the system's distances, deep in inner orbit around a planet too far away to resolve. But he knew it was there. He had followed everything. The session, the vote, the 14 Titan positions on the map, which someone had leaked to the public record within 2 hours of the session closing, because that was the kind of thing that did not stay quiet for long. He had finally looked up what Prometheus meant. He had read the old myth, the figure who took fire from the gods and gave it to the people who needed it, the punishment, the refusal to stop. He stood at the port for a while. The relay console chimed. His transport was docked and waiting. He gave the station one last look. The broken food dispenser, the console that had screamed on the most important morning of the century, the observation port he had pressed his face against. He picked up his bag. Whatever came next, whatever the new council looked like, whatever a galaxy with humanity fully in it became, Prex had been here first. He had been the first to detect the line, the first to see the running lights, the first to read the name on the hall. He stepped into the docking tube, the station door sealed behind him. Outside, in the dark, in orbit above a world that had just changed, the lights of 100 human vessels moved through the black like new stars someone had decided. After a very long time, it was finally the right moment to light. The defense grid controller had 37 years of experience behind him. He had been present at 2 council military actions. He had managed the grid through 3 separate first contact protocols, 2 border escalations with the Karathi, and 1 incident that the official record described as a navigational misunderstanding, and everyone present knew was not. In 37 years, he had never once powered down a weapons grid after it had been activated in response to a confirmed contact. He powered it down now. His targeting officer, a young Velhari named Avk, had brought the analysis report to his console and set it down and stepped back without being asked, because she had read the numbers and understood that this was not a report you handed to a superior and waited nearby for questions. This was a report you sat down and stepped back from. He read it. The platform array's maximum combined sustained output directed against the Prometheus hull at the estimated material composition over 30 seconds of continuous fire. Penetration of outer armor layer to approximately 4% depth. He read it again. 4%, 30 seconds, 47 platforms. Every gun they had in this system fired everything they had for half a minute, and they would put 4% deep scratches in the outermost layer of a hole that had by the mass reading several more layers behind it. He sat with that number for a moment. He let it be what it was. Then he said, "Stand down the grid." Av looked at him. "All platforms are passive," he said. "Log it as precautionary de-escalation to avoid triggering an incident. Do not attach the analysis report to the log entry." "Sir, protocol requires." "If we open fire on that ship and the math is correct," he said, "we have spent our ammunition and shown them the full range of what we can do. In exchange, we will have 4% of the way through their outer hull." He looked at his board. "If we fire and the math is somehow wrong," he stops. There was no good ending to that sentence. "Stand down the grid." Ake turned back to her station. The boards went dark. 47 platforms cycling down one by one from green to gray. On the orbital display above his console, the Prometheus completed its final approach vector, smooth, unhurried, perfectly calculated, and settled into a stable orbit above Velhari Prime. It did not adjust its course during the grid's active window. It did not alter velocity. It did not take any evasive action whatsoever. It had not noticed the grid, or it had noticed and had not considered it relevant. The defense grid controller looked at his gray boards for a long moment. Then he filed the de-escalation log, as he had said he would, and he did not attach the analysis, and he did not speak about it to anyone, because some numbers were better understood slowly and in private than quickly and in front of a room. The communication request came through 47 minutes after orbital insertion, not immediately. The ship had arrived, settled into its orbit, gone quiet, and sat there for nearly an hour before it reached out. Zelth had been watching the timer on the relay board while he waited. He had noted the gap. Deliberate. Everything about this had been deliberate from the moment the contact trace appeared on Pre's screen. The gap was another message in the same language as the unhurried approach and the unanswered hailing frequency. The message was, "I am here. I am not in a hurry. You may take the time you need to absorb this." The relay director opened the channel. A face appeared in the projection above the council table. Zelth had seen photographs of humans. The survey file had carried biological documentation, standard imagery, physical assessment, the kind of visual record a survey team produced for any catalog species. Bipedal, soft-bodied, variable coloring, forward-facing eyes, flat face, No natural armor or notable physical defenses. Designation 7. The photographs had the quality all survey file images had, which was the quality of something looked at rather than something encountered. The difference between a photograph and a person turned out to be significant. The woman in the projection was medium height, dark-haired, with an angular face and dark skin, and the look of someone who had spent considerable time in environments less comfortable than council chambers. She wore a dark uniform with rank markings at the collar. She was sitting very straight in a command chair, and the room visible behind her was large and clearly operational soft figures moving in the background, screens lit, the low hum of a working vessel. She was looking directly at him, not at the general projection, at him, at Zelda, at the head of the table, which meant she knew who sat at the head of the table. "I am Admiral Kira Vasquez," she said. Her galactic standard was clean and unaccented, not the careful, slightly formal standard of someone working in a second language, the natural, precise standard of someone who had been using it for a long time. "Commanding officer of the Terran naval ship Prometheus. I represent the Terran Unified Authority." One pause, one beat, perfectly timed. "I believe this is our first official contact." "It is," Zelda said, "though not your first knowledge of us." Something adjusted in her expression. Not surprise, recognition. She had wondered if he would circle around at first, or go straight to it. She had prepared for both. "No," she said. "We have been aware of the Galactic Council for 82 years. We decoded your open transmission frequencies in year 11 of that period. We have been attentive since then." Vorsin said from beside Zeldeth, "You are listed in the Council's survey database as a pre-apient candidate species." He was using the tone he used when he wanted to establish the Council's authority as the natural frame for any conversation. "Your world had not achieved orbital capability at the time of our assessment. We achieved orbit 4 years and 8 months after your survey team left our system," Vasquez said. She said it with the same flatness she had used for everything else. No heat in it, no performance, just the fact stated. "We noted that no second survey team returned." A brief pause. "We also noted that your long-range sensors continued to make regular scans of our system's outer boundary." Vorsin had nothing to say to that. He tried to find something. Zelth watched him try. He did not find it. "We chose not to announce ourselves at that time," Vasquez said. "We had reasons for that decision. I am glad to discuss them in a formal session if the Council is willing to arrange one." She looked at Zelda directly. "We would request a meeting with the full Council within 24 hours. There are several matters we would like to address. Council protocol for first contact situations requires a preliminary diplomatic exchange phase before any full session can be." Vorin began. "We are familiar with your protocol," Vasquez said, not cutting him off. There was no sharpness in it. She was simply clarifying a fact that had been misstated by assumption. "We would respectfully request an exception in this case. We have waited a significant amount of time for this conversation." She held the look at Zeleth. "We would prefer not to extend the waiting period." Zelth looked at her, brown eyes, giving nothing away. He had spent 400 years learning to read faces across species, and what he read in hers was not impatience and not hostility and not the nervous energy of a first contact situation. It was the settled, patient steadiness of someone who had planned carefully and arrived exactly where they intended to arrive and had nothing left to be anxious about. 24 hours, he said. "We will arrange the session." "Thank you, High Speaker." She said his title the way equals said titles to each other, without difference, without challenge, just correct. The channel closed. The chamber sat with it. The Lenari observer Tin, who had not spoken in several hours, said, "She knew your title. She addressed you first, without looking to see who you were. She knew the seating arrangement before she looked at the room." "Yes," Zeld said. "They have studied our formal structure. They have had 82 years of Council broadcast transmissions." Zelth said, "Our session records are public archives. Our hierarchy and seating protocols are fully documented. He looked at the empty space in the projection where her face had been. They know everything about us that we have ever said in a room with a recording running. Vorsen said quietly, "What do they want?" Zelda thought about the phrase she had used. We have waited a significant amount of time for this conversation. He thought about how she had said it, not with frustration, not with accusation, but with the weight of something that had been carried a long way and was now very precisely being set down. "We will find out in 24 hours, he said. Prepare all delegations for a full formal session, he paused, and bring me the resource committee files, the official ones and the unofficial ones. Vorsin went very still. All of them, Zelth said. The council did not sleep well that night. Sauron filed 4 formal requests for preemptive action before the 3rd hour. The council clerk denied the first 3 on procedural grounds, and then contacted Zelth, who approved a standing instruction, allowing the clerk to deny subsequent requests of the same type without forwarding them. The Karathi delegation lodged a formal objection to the session format and sent 2 follow-up objections when the first went unanswered. The Lenari faction requested an emergency sub-council meeting to discuss the legal classification question, received approval, held the meeting, reached no conclusions, and filed a summary document that was thorough and entirely useless. Zelith read the resource committee files, the official ones first, clean and careful, written by people who knew they were writing for the record. Formal language, appropriate hedging, the kind of document that would look reasonable to any outside review. Survey classification confirmed. Ongoing long-range observation recommended. Next formal assessment is scheduled pending resource committee availability, then the unofficial ones. He read them slowly. He had known in a general way what was in them. He had not read them in full before. He read them now at his desk, in the quiet of his private chambers, with the kind of attention he gave to things that could not be unread. They were thorough documents. Someone had done careful work, estimating the mineral yield of the human home world. Someone had run detailed projections on the timeline for designation. 7 species to transition out of the industrial stage, the point at which the legal framework became complicated. Someone had written in plain language a recommendation for when to begin preliminary assessment activities and how to do it without triggering the council's first contact legal protections. How to do it without triggering the council's first contact legal protections. Zeldith set the files down. He sat at his desk and looked at nothing for a while. He thought about the woman in the projection, the brown eyes that gave nothing away, the 47-minute gap before she said hello, the ship in orbit above his planet, stable and patient that had crossed half the galaxy in a straight line and not stopped once along the way. He thought she read these files 80 years ago. He thought someone like her did, someone who read these files and then went to the people around them and said, "They are deciding what to do with our world. We are not invited to the discussion." He thought about what he would have done, what any people would have done. He closed the files. He did not sleep that night. He sat at his desk and thought about what he was going to say in 24 hours and what he was going to do after that, and what the council he had spent 400 years helping to build needed to become if it was going to survive the next 400. Aboard the Prometheus, the night watch carried on as it always did. The ship ran on a standard 24-hour cycle matched to Earth time, which meant that while the council's delegations were sitting in their various anxious silences across Velhari Prime, 3 shifts of 14,000 crew, members each were doing their jobs. Engineers running maintenance cycles on systems that the council's analysts were still trying to understand. Navigation officers logging the orbital track, updating the gravitational model for the planet below, nodding the positions of council vessels with professional interest and no particular concern. Medical staff, research personnel, communications officers monitoring the council's relay frequencies, still monitoring, still attentive as they had been for 82 years. The ship did not sleep. Commander O. I walked the bridge at the 3rd hour of the night watch, which was his habit when there was too much to think about, and thinking while seated was not working. The bridge on the night watch was quieter than the day, the same work, lower volume, the particular ease of a crew that had done this long enough to trust each other in the dark. He stopped at the forward viewport, Velhari primed below them. City lights on the night side visible from orbit. The pattern of them dense around what the maps told him was the capital. Down there in those lights, the most powerful political body in the known galaxy was having a very bad night. He thought about the Admiral, about the way she had looked during the transmission, and after it the same. No change in her face when the channel opened, no change when it closed. He had served under Vasquez for 11 years, and in that time he had seen her be many things in many situations. He had never once seen her lose the thread. He thought about the high speaker, the old reptilian, 400 years and some, the face that gave nothing away. The way he had said, 2 hours is workable. Not the words of someone agreeing to a request, but the words of someone accepting a framing they had already decided to work within. He thought those two are going to understand each other. He thought that was either the best thing that could happen or the most dangerous thing that could happen. He looked at the city lights on the night side of the planet below. He thought, in 24 hours, we will know which one. He went back to his post. The Prometheus turned in its orbit, patient and steady, the way it had been turning since before anyone on the planet below had closed their eyes that night. Its running lights marked the dark. Its sensors logged everything. Its 42,000 crew went about their work. It was not going anywhere. It had arrived exactly where it intended to be. The 24 hours were the longest the Council had spent in collective stillness since the Karathi border wars. Nobody used the word fear. It was not the kind of word Council members used about themselves, not in formal records, not in the corridors, not even in the private messages that the archive technically did not keep, but practically did. They used words like concern and strategic uncertainty, and the need for careful deliberation. But Zelda had been in this building for 400 years, and he knew what it looked like when 23 diplomatic delegations were afraid. And it looked like this. Doors closed earlier than usual, voices lower than usual, and a particular quality of silence in the communal halls that was not the silence of people with nothing to say. Sorin filed 6 formal requests for preemptive military action in the first 12 hours. The first 3 went to Zelda's desk and were denied with a written response. After the 4th, Zeldath approved a standing clerk's instruction. Any further strike requests of this type were to be declined on arrival without forwarding. The clerk had looked at him for a moment when the instruction came through. Yes, Zeldath said. All of them. The clerk sent the instruction. 2 more requests arrived. They declined. Sorin filed a formal objection to the declination process. The objection was declined. Sorin filed an objection to that. Zelth read it, set it aside, and went back to thinking. He had been thinking for 16 hours. He was thinking about the resource committee files he had read in the night, about the careful language and the careful projections, and the recommendations written by people who had done thorough work on the question of how to approach a world that belonged to someone else without technically breaking the rules that existed to protect worlds that belonged to someone else. He was thinking about the gap in that logic, the place where technical compliance and actual right conduct had separated so cleanly that the gap had gone unnoticed for years. He was thinking about the woman in the projection, the 47-minute wait, the precise galactic standard, the brown eyes. He was thinking, she knows everything we put in the record. She knows everything we said out loud. He was thinking the question is how much she knows that we did not say out loud. It happened at hour 16. The monitoring station tracking the Prometheus filed an alert. The ship's weapon systems were cycling to active status. The alert propagated simultaneously to every delegation terminal in the building. The Council's emergency response channel opened automatically. Sorin was speaking before the alert tone finished. This is the attack. This is what we are. Which direction are the weapons oriented? Zelth said. The relay officer checked. A pause of 3 seconds that felt longer away from the planet high speaker. The targeting solution is oriented toward another pause. The outer debris belt. The outer debris belt. The navigational hazard rings at the edge of the Council system, a spread of rock and ice and compressed metal that had been sitting in the approach chart since before the Council existed, flagged in the navigation registry, noted in every pilot's briefing, and never addressed because addressing it was not any one member's specific responsibility, and therefore remained everyone's general inconvenience indefinitely. "They are not targeting us," Zelth said. "Soren said they are powering weapons while in orbit above our primary planet's end. They are not targeting us." Zelth said, "Everyone stopped talking. Wait." The room stopped. They waited. The relay board was quiet. The weapons alert light stayed active. Weapons systems live. Targeting solution locked. And then at the 11-second mark, a second alert came through. Not from the Prometheus, from the Outer System Automated Navigation Registry. Navigation Hazard Body 7P889. 3 kilometers of dense iron-nickel rock catalogued in the Hazard Registry for 412 years, exactly as long as Zeld had been alive. He noted, as if the asteroid had been placed there specifically to mark the duration of his tenure had been cleared. Status change. Hazard removed. No fragment trace. No debris field. No secondary collision risk flagged. No record of anything except the asteroid existing, and then a gap of 11 seconds, and then the asteroid not existing. The registry update sat on the relay board. The council chamber sat around it. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Not Soren, not Vorsen, not the Karathi delegation that had been loudest about the security implications of the ship's presence for the past 16 hours. The room had the quality of people who had understood something and were deciding whether to say so or wait to see if someone else said it first. A communication request came through from Prometheus. Zelt accepted it immediately. Vasquez was standing this time. She had not been standing for the first contact call. She was standing now, which told him something about how she wanted this message to read. "My apologies for the unannounced demonstration," she said. "That navigation hazard has been active in your outer system for a considerable time. We noticed it in your approach charts during our transit preparation. Consider it a courtesy." One pause, the practiced kind. "We look forward to the session tomorrow." The channel closed. The chamber was quiet. Zelda looked at the registry update on the board. He looked at it for a while. Then he looked at Saurin. All three of the Saurin bodies were very still. The overlapping voice that was always ready, that had been filing strike requests for 16 hours, did not say anything. Zeleth waited. It did not say anything. "Good," he said quietly. "Then we are in agreement that we will proceed with the scheduled session." Nobody objected. He contacted Vasquez privately at hour 18. He had been thinking about the shape of the meeting since the night before, and he had made a decision, and the decision needed to be communicated directly rather than through the relay's formal request process. Because the formal request process added documentation, and documentation created positions. And he wanted this conversation to happen before anyone had a formal position. They needed to defend Council, first contact protocol. He said when the channel opened, specifies that initial formal sessions are conducted via projected communication rather than direct physical presence. The security framework for full Council gatherings. "I understand the protocol." Vasquez said I wanted to ensure a high speaker. Her voice was patient the way experienced people were patient. Not suppressing impatience, genuinely unconcerned with the pace. "We have come a very long distance. We are prepared to meet in person. A projected session is," she considered her word, "insufficient for a conversation of this importance. We would prefer to be in the same room. The full council convening aboard your vessel is not realistic." "I am not proposing the full council," she said. "I am proposing a preliminary meeting, a small delegation from the council's leadership aboard the Prometheus prior to the formal session." A pause. "We will provide full security guarantees. Your delegates will be free to leave at any point. The meeting will last exactly as long as you want it to last." "What is the purpose of a preliminary meeting?" Zelth said. "We would like to show you the ship," she said. He looked at her. "That is the purpose," she said. We want you to see it before tomorrow." Zelda thought about that. He thought about the specific sequence she was proposing. Tour the ship, then hold the formal session. He thought about what that sequence was designed to accomplish. He thought about 42,000 crew members and corridors wide enough for ground vehicles and a hole that a weapons grid could not meaningfully engage. He thought about what it would mean to sit at a session table having seen all of that, versus sitting at the table having only read the numbers. She wanted them to understand what they were in conversation with, not threatened by it, not intimidated into a position. She was not that crude. She wanted them to understand it clearly and completely, so that the conversation that followed would be a conversation between people who were operating with the same information, rather than a conversation where one side was working from data and the other side was working from a mass reading on a relay screen. It was, he thought, a generous thing to offer. It was also, he thought, a very precise thing to offer. 3 delegates, he said, myself, Ambassador Vorsen, and Observer Tin. We can accommodate more. 3 is sufficient, he said, and I want the tour before the formal session. That is what I proposed, she said. I mean, immediately before he said the morning of the session, we tour the ship, and then we went directly to the table. I want to understand what I am looking at while the understanding is still current. Something shifted in her face. Not a smile. The adjustment a face makes when an unexpected move turns out to be the right one. Agreed. She said, "Tomorrow morning we will be ready for you." The channel closed. Zelda sat at his desk for a moment. He thought about the look on her face when he'd said he wanted the tour immediately before the session. He thought about what it meant that she had been pleased by that, rather than unsettled by it. She wanted him to walk into the session with the ship still in his mind. He had just told her he wanted the same thing. He thought, "We are going to understand each other very well." He thought, "I'm not certain whether that is good news." Vorsen came to see him an hour later. He sat across from Zelda's desk with his mandibles moving in the slow rhythm that meant he was working through something he did not want to say directly and was trying to find an indirect route that was still honest. Zeleth waited. "The resource committee files," Vorin said finally. "Yes, the unofficial ones." "Yes." Vorsin was quiet for a moment. "She knows about them, almost certainly." "We don't know that. Know the survey file." Zelth said, "She knows the official committee record. She decoded 82 years of our transmissions." He looked at Vorin. The unofficial files were circulated on internal council channels. Council channels that have been broadcasting in this region of space for 80 years. He paused. If I had been listening to someone else's internal communications for 82 years, and if those communications contained files describing plans for my home world, I would have found those files. Vorsin's mandibles went still. "She knows," Zelth said. "We should assume she knows everything. It will prevent us from being surprised in the session. If she raises it in an open session, if she raises it," Zelth said, "we will address it directly. It was a mistake. We will say so." He looked at the desk. It was a serious mistake. Saying so clearly and first is better than being made to say it. Vorin did not look comfortable. He had never looked comfortable with admissions of error, which was a trait Zeld had spent decades working around in him. "She has 14 ships," Vorsin said, "positioned at. I know where they are positioned. If she decides to, she is not here to take anything." Zelth said, if that was her intention, she would not have announced herself. She would simply have acted. He looked at Vorsin. "She is here to sit at the table. That is what she wants. Our job tomorrow is to make sure the table is worth sitting at." Vorsin left. Zeldith sat alone with the files. He thought about the asteroid that no longer existed. 11 seconds, no fragment, no debris. The registry updated filing automatically because the system had been built to assume rocks moved slowly and broke into smaller pieces and left trails, and something had happened that the system had no category for, and so it had simply filed. Hazard removed. He thought she called it a courtesy. He thought she was right that it was. He thought she is also right that it was a demonstration, and she knows that I know it was a demonstration, and she chose to call it a courtesy anyway, which is a very specific kind of honesty. He thought, tomorrow is going to be the most important session this council has held in 400 years. He prepared for it, the way he had prepared for everything important in 400 years. Carefully, thoroughly, and with the full acceptance that he did not control what the other person brought to the table, only what he brought himself. In the hours before dawn on Velhari Prime, the city was quiet. The Prometheus was visible from the surface if you knew where to look, a moving point of light among the fixed stars, white and steady, tracing its orbital line above the planet with the patience of something that had nowhere else to be. A few people saw it. Late shift workers, insomniacs, the occasional scientist running a long observation program who happened to orient their equipment in the right direction. Most of the planet slept without knowing it was there. In the council building, lights were on in several offices, delegations preparing positions, staff reviewing files, the Lanari faction holding their third sub-council meeting in 12 hours and producing their third summary document that resolved nothing. In one office near the top of the high speaker tower, Zelth was still at his desk. He was not reviewing files anymore. He had reviewed everything there was to review. He was sitting with his hands folded and looking at nothing, which was what 400 years had taught him to do when the reviewing was done, and the thing remaining was to walk into a room and be present for what happened next. He looked out the window. The point of light moved steadily across the sky. He thought about the name on the hall, TNS Prometheus. He had looked up the myth 2 days ago when the translation came through. An old human story, one of their oldest. A figure who stole fire from the gods and gave it to the people, and was punished for it enormously, and did not stop, and did not ask to be forgiven, and did not pretend the punishment was unjust. He thought about what it meant that they had named their first great ship after that story. He thought they are telling us something about themselves with that name. He thought we should listen to it. The point of light completed its arc and slipped below the horizon. Zelda stood up from his desk, straightened his formal robes, and went to get ready for the morning. The shuttle left Velhari Prime at first light. 3 passengers in the diplomatic cabin, Zelth, in his full formal robes, sitting upright and still. Ambassador Vorsen beside him, mandibles moving in the slow, worried rhythm that Zelda had stopped trying to read precisely. It meant discomfort broadly, which was accurate and sufficient. Observer Tin of the Lari across from them, his long, pale hands folded over his log, his face doing what Lanari faces always did in high-stakes moments, which was absolutely nothing. The shuttle pilot was a young Velhari male who had been briefed on the destination and had not spoken since they boarded. For the first 6 minutes, the view outside was Velhari Prime, the atmosphere. Then above it, the familiar orbital space the Council had occupied for centuries. Known distances, known objects, the small shapes of Council relay platforms in their standard positions. Then the Prometheus was visible. It was not visible the way distant objects were visible, a shape you had to locate, a point that required context to read. It was visible the way a cliff was visible when you walked around a corner and found it in front of you. It occupied a portion of the viewport, and then more of the viewport, and then the viewport was not large enough to show all of it, and the shuttle had not even closed a third of the distance yet. Vorin said, "It is larger in person." Nobody answered because the statement was so obviously true that responding to it felt beside the point. They flew toward it. At 12 minutes out, the Prometheus was all there was in the forward view. The planet behind it was gone. Not hidden, just outscaled. The way a single large object close up outscales everything behind it. The hall moved past in dark gray layers, cross-reinforced, textured with the dense regularity of something built to take impact from any direction and keep its shape. The running lights along the edges were structural. Zelth had understood this from the images, but seeing them at close range made their purpose physical rather than conceptual. Without them, the ship would have been in darkness with edges. With them, it was legible. It said, "I am here." It said, "I am this large." It said, "You should understand both things." To reach the docking bay, the shuttle had to fly parallel to the hull for 3 full minutes. 3 minutes at shuttle speed along the hull, and the hull did not end. It stretched ahead of them and behind them with equal indifference, and Zelth watched it and did the arithmetic in his mind, and arrived at numbers he had already seen on the relay board, and found that seeing them in his mind had not been the same as watching the hall go past for 3 uninterrupted minutes. The arithmetic had been abstract. This was not abstract. The docking bay received them. It was large enough for 30 shuttles simultaneously. It held at the moment of their arrival 2 heavy fighters with angular geometries. The Council's design catalog had no match for 4 transport vessels of a size that would have been notable ships in any Council member's fleet, and something in the far corner that Zelda could not classify from the entrance and filed away to ask about later. The ceiling was 40 meters above the deck. The air smelled of metal and composite materials and machine oil, and something warmer underneath. The particular smell of a space where many people had been living and working for a long time. The sound level was what Zelth noticed most. Not loud, but constant, and layered and full. The sound of a vessel operating at full capacity. Somewhere deep in the ship, something large was running. Closer, the sounds of the bay itself, equipment, voices, the specific percussion of a working deck. The sound of 42,000 people going about their ordinary day. A human officer met them at the shuttle ramp. Young, dark-skinned, with the automatic precision of movement that came from deep military training. Every gesture is efficient, nothing wasted. He introduced himself as Lieutenant Commander Ray and spoke Galactic Standard with a different accent than Vasquez. The words shaped slightly differently, which meant it was a learned language deployed from a slightly different internal structure. He guided them out of the bay and into the ship's interior. The corridor was wide enough to drive ground vehicles side by side. They passed crew members from the first step into the corridor. Dozens of them, then more humans in the same dark uniform, moving in both directions, carrying equipment, speaking to each other in the human language that Zelda's translation earpiece rendered with small gaps, where idiom outran literal meaning. Some of them glanced at the delegation. A few looked with open curiosity. None of them stopped. None of them slowed their pace. The work of the ship did not adjust for visitors. It was the ease that struck him, not the size. He had known the size from the numbers. The ease. These people had lived here long enough for 42,000 of them to share a ship the size of a small settlement and find it unremarkable. They moved through it the way people moved through places they had known for years. Familiar turns, known distances, home. How long has Prometheus been in continuous operation? Zelda asked Reyes. 11 years commissioned high speaker, Ray said. She was the first of the Titan class. 11 years. The ship had been running for 11 years. 3 years before the Council's long-range sensors had detected the first indication of large-scale construction activity in the human system. And then that detection had been flagged and reviewed and attributed to natural gas giant atmospheric events and filed away. Zelth had read that filing in the survey archive. He had read the analyst's reasoning. The reasoning had been technically defensible. It had also been wrong. They passed a long gallery section where one wall was transparent, not armor glass, decorative glass chosen for the view. Through it, at this angle was visible the surface of Velhari Prime, blue-gray and curved very far below. The capital city's footprint was just visible as a texture change on the surface. The council building, where Zelth had sat at his desk all night, was down there somewhere, small enough from here to put behind one finger. Tin had stopped making notes. He was looking out the gallery window. After a moment, he took out his stylus again and wrote something Zeldeth could not see. Admiral Vasquez met them in the main observation deck. It ran the full width of the bow section. The forward wall was entirely transparent, hull material refined to near invisibility, structural, not decorative, which meant the view was unobstructed space. No frame, no division, just the stars and Velhari Prime below, and the council system spreading out in all directions, familiar and suddenly different from up here, smaller and quieter than it looked from inside it. Vasquez was standing at the viewport when they entered, looking out, her hands at her sides. She turned when she heard them. She was wearing the same dark uniform, rank markings at collar and shoulder, no formal robes, no ceremony, nothing that suggested the meeting required performance. She looked exactly the same as she had looked in the projection on the council's screen, which meant she was the same person in a room that she was on a screen, which was not universally true, and which Zelth noted. Captain Marchetti stood to her right, the diplomat positioned forward between Vasquez and the approaching delegation. The interpreter's instinct, the habit of bodies that had spent years moving to where the conversation was most likely to need translation. High Speaker Vasquez said, "Ambassador Observer TV, all correct, all precisely pronounced." Admiral Zelth said. They sat at a table near the viewport. Behind Vasquez's head, through the transparent wall, Velhari Prime turned in its orbit, slow, patient. Zelth noted the arrangement. The planet behind her, his planet visible from her seat. He had been placed with his back to it. The arrangement was not accidental, and was not intended aggressively. It was intended to be honest. This is where we are. This is the shape of the situation. Let us talk with that clearly established between us. He appreciated honesty even when it was uncomfortable. "The ship is extraordinary," he said. "Thank you." She said it the way people said it when they meant it, rather than when they were being polite. The crew of 42,000. Standard complement for a Titan-class vessel. Yes, there are 14 such vessels. Zelth said 14 commissioned. She said 3 in late construction. Vortson said, "Where was it built?" "We have maintained regular long-range scan protocols across your system for 60 years. No scan returned evidence of large-scale construction. We built an orbit of our moon. Vasquez said the moon's mass generates sufficient gravitational interference at your scan frequencies. We identified your scanning schedule early in our monitoring and adjusted our construction shielding accordingly." She said this the way she said everything, without emphasis, without pride, without apology, just the fact. "We identified your scanning schedule." Zelth thought about how many years that sentence covered. He thought about the Council's survey team leaving the human system and the Council's long-range sensors maintaining passive watch and the humans down on their planet. Young species, early industrialists looking up at the stars with their early telescopes, not knowing anyone was looking back and then decoding the signals and then reading the files and then watching back and then building. "How long did the full construction program take?" Tivan asked. He had set down his stylus again. He seemed to have decided that the log could wait. Vasquez looked at him. The Prometheus took 9 years to build. She launched 11 years ago. The broader program began 71 years ago with initial infrastructure and materials development. She paused. "It has been a significant national effort." 71 years, Vorson said. "Yes." Vorson's mandibles were very still. "You built for 71 years in orbit of your moon behind gravitational interference." He stopped. Started again. The entire Titan-class program, 4 16 support vessels. All of it without him stopped again. Without anyone knowing, Vasquez said she said it for him, not unkindly. Yes. The room absorbed that 71 years. A civilization that the Council had last looked at directly and classified as early industrial, not worth close watching. Pre-apient candidate. That civilization had spent 71 years doing this quietly behind a moon, while appearing from the outside to be exactly what they had been classified as. Unremarkable, not yet relevant. The kind of world you noted in the database and came back to later when you had time. You found the Resource Committee discussion files. Zelth said he said it plainly. No preamble, no softening. He had decided in the night that plainness was the only approach worth taking. Vasquez looked at him for a moment. She was very still. "Yes," she said. One word, flat, complete. The tone of something that had been known for a long time and carried far enough that it no longer required a particular color. "The official ones and the informal ones," Zelda said. "Yes," she said again. When the official records were decoded in our 14th year of monitoring, she said the informal committee communications took longer. They were on a different encryption layer. We recovered them in year 22. Year 22, 60 years ago. The humans had been reading the Resource Committee's private discussions about their home world for 60 years. Zelda sat with that. He thought about what it felt like to read a document describing your world as a resource candidate, to read the projections about mineral yields, to read the timeline analysis, to read the recommendations about how to proceed without triggering the legal protections that existed for exactly this kind of situation, written by people who were confident you would never read them because you were a pre-apient candidate who did not know the council existed. To read that, to fold it up, to go home and say, "We have a great deal of work to do. I owe you an apology," Zelth said. The room was very quiet. Vortin looked at him. Marchetti's expression did not change. Vasquez looked at him with the steady brown eyes that gave nothing away and waited. "The Resource Committee's discussions were a serious error," he said. "The informal files in particular, the recommendations about legal frameworks and timelines. That was not the conduct the Council's charter demands of its members, and it was not the conduct I would defend if it were brought before a formal review." He held her gaze. "We were wrong." Vasquez was quiet for a moment. "I know you were," she said. "Not I accept your apology. Not thank you for saying so. Just I know you were." The statement of someone who had known it for 60 years and did not need it dressed up. "It is why you built," he said. "It is part of why we built," she said. "We also built because we were curious, because we are that kind of people." Something shifted slightly in her face. "We build things. It is what we do." The committee files gave us direction and urgency, but we would have built eventually anyway. She looked at the viewport, at the stars, at the planet below. We had been looking at the sky and wondering what was out there for a very long time. We were going to come looking eventually. "Your files just told us what we would find and what we needed to arrive prepared. And the fleet positions," Zelth said, "the 14 ships at the Council infrastructure points. That was not incidental." "No," she said, "you placed them before you came here." 14 months before, she said it took 11 months to deploy them to position. 2.5 years of preparation for this conversation. Ships placed quietly at every critical point in the Council's network infrastructure. Not blocking, not active, just present. While the Council went about its normal operation and discussed its resource committees and filed its surveys and had no idea that anything had changed. "You wanted us to know," he said. "When you showed us the manifest, you wanted us to see the positions. We wanted you to have complete information," she said. "We are not here to threaten the Council. We have not taken any hostile action, and we will not. The fleet positions are operational." She held his gaze. "But you asked to understand what you were looking at before you sat at a table with us. The manifest is part of that understanding." He thought she was doing this exactly right. He thought she knows the difference between leverage and threat, and she is using one and not the other. And the difference is honesty, and she has been honest with me at every step. He said, "What do you want from tomorrow's session?" She said, "A seat at the table. Simple, no elaboration. 4 words that contained everything they needed to contain." "A full seat," she said, "not a candidacy, not an observation status. Full membership, equal standing, equal vote." "The charter requirements for full membership are designed for new contacts," she said. "We are not a new contact. We are a civilization that has been aware of yours for 82 years and present in your space for 14 months and has been operating in a manner consistent with Council law for the entirety of that period." She said it without aggression, with the clean certainty of someone laying out a legal argument they had been refining for a long time. "We are requesting recognition of what is already true." Zelth looked at her. She looked back at him. Outside, Velhari Prime turned in its slow orbit, ancient and indifferent. The planet he had governed for most of his adult life, visible behind the human admiral's head from a distance that made it look small. He said, "I will put it to the full council." She said, "That is all we are asking." The delegation was given a full tour of the ship before the shuttle returned them to the surface. Ray walked them through the engineering levels, the research bays, and the medical complex. He walked them through crew quarters. Compact, functional, occupied by people who were clearly accustomed to them. He walked them through a training bay where human soldiers were running combat drills that Zelth watched for a while without comment, nodding to the precision and the controlled aggression and the ease of it. The way the drills had the quality of habit rather than performance, he walked them through the ship's library. The library was large. Actual physical volumes alongside digital archives which Vorsin noted were unusual. Tiven stopped for a long time in front of a section of physical books and ran one pale finger along the spines and looked at the titles. "These are in Galactic Standard," he said. "The Council Archive Collection," Ray said. 82 years of transmitted records. "We have the full public catalogue." He paused. "The research team has also translated approximately 6,000 volumes of human literature into Standard. They are in the section behind." Tin looked at the shelves. He wrote something in his log. Near the end of the tour, in a long corridor that ran along the inner hull, Zelda stopped and looked at the wall. It was covered in photographs, not screens. Actual printed photographs mounted on the wall in no particular formal arrangement. Images of people, groups and individuals and families, children, places, blue skies, oceans, cities, landscapes that were clearly not Velhari, written notes on some of them, names, dates, small mementos tucked into corners of frames. A human rating passing by slowed when she saw him looking. "Memorial wall," she said. "The crew post photos of home, people they left behind." She looked at the wall herself for a moment. "It's a long deployment." Zelda looked at the photographs, the faces looking back at him. Faces of people who had no idea their image had ended up on the wall of a ship in orbit around the most politically significant planet in the known galaxy. People who had built something very large and sent it somewhere very far away, and were waiting at home to find out how it went. He thought about the scope of it. 71 years. Not one person's project. Not one generation's project. A thing handed down from people who had read the files and made the decision to 3 generations of engineers and builders and crew and diplomats and soldiers. All of them working on the same long, patient answer to the same question. He thought about the myth again. Prometheus, the fire, the refusal to stop. He thought we should have said hello first. He thought, "Tomorrow, I will make sure the table is worth the seat." He turned away from the photographs and walked toward the shuttle bay. The ship continued around him, enormous and unhurried, all 42,000 of its people going about their ordinary, remarkable day. The council chamber was ready an hour before the session. The staff had laid the table in the full formal configuration, named plaques, delegation flags, the traditional water vessels that nobody ever drank from, the session recording array mounted at the ceiling center, 23 delegation positions around the great circle, the projection unit at the heart of the table, polished, checked, ready, and 1 additional position. 3 chairs are placed at the table between the Velhari block and the Lenari section. A name placard that read in Galactic Standard, Tan Unified Authority. No flag. They had not yet been issued one, which meant whoever handled flags had made a decision to prepare a space and let the question of what filled it resolve itself in the session. Zelda stood at the entrance to the chamber and looked at those 3 chairs for a moment. The Cathy delegation had filed a formal objection to the seating arrangement at 3 bar in the morning. The Lenari faction had filed 2. Sorin had filed one that was also technically a 4th strike request, with the seating objection attached to it as a supporting argument, which suggested that someone on the Sorin legal staff had been up very late and running out of creative approaches. Zelda had declined all objections on the same procedural grounds. The High Speaker retained discretionary authority over chamber configuration for sessions convened under the emergency charter. It was a real authority. He had never used it for anything this significant before. He looked at the 3 chairs. He thought, if this goes wrong, it will be remembered as the decision that changed everything. He thought if it goes right, it will be remembered the same way. He walked into the chamber. The human delegation arrived exactly on time. 3 of them, as agreed, walked in through the main delegation entrance like every other member that morning. No special entry, no ceremony, no announcement. Vasquez, Marchetti, and Commander Osai in a line, all in the same dark dress uniform with the same clean rank markings. No weapons visible, no guards. 3 people who had crossed the known galaxy in a ship the size of a natural satellite, walking into a room full of people who had spent the last 3 days processing that fact and looking for all the world-like people who had done this before. Vasquez looked at the 3 chairs. Something settled in her face. A small thing quickly went away. The expression of a person who had spent a long time preparing for a specific moment and had just confirmed that the moment looked the way they had hoped it would look. She walked to the table and sat down. The room adjusted around that fact, delegates at their positions shifting almost imperceptibly, conversations dropping quiet, the collective attention of 23 civilizations turning toward the chairs that now held occupants who were not yet a member of anything this table represented. But who was sitting at it anyway? Zelda took his place at the head of the table. "The council convenes in an emergency formal session," he said. "The matter before us is the application of the Terran Unified Authority for full membership in the Galactic Council." He looked around the table once slowly, giving each delegation the acknowledgement of being seen. "We begin with introductions." The introductions took an hour. Every delegation introduced themselves to the human representatives, name, species, the territory they held in council membership, their years of standing. It was the oldest protocol in the council's history, unchanged since the founding. Th.